Hi everyone, today's video will be talking about Snake Draft, which is a draft variant of Android Netrunner. Now, draft play in Netrunner has been one of my most favorite things to do. Whenever you are bored of a regular constructed play or you just want to try something different, Netrunner Draft actually offers a lot of depth and very interesting gameplay and decisions. Now, there are lots of resources on SteamHack articles and the like, detailing the drafting, particularly cube draft, which is the most popular draft format. I also did a video last time on cube design myself, so go check that out if you're interested. But today's video will be on Snake Draft. Now, Snake Draft is not something that I came up with. It was, if I'm not wrong, created by the big boy, because obviously he knows how to design things really well, and he got a bunch of people to play it online, and it went really interestingly well. So I decided to replicate it, and guess what? Yes, I'm hosting another tournament or draft, so as to speak. I'm doing a snake draft for 7 other UK players, and it's currently underway. We're having a lot of fun with it, and I would like to spend this video to show you the rules explanation for the snake draft, because I believe most of you would not have even heard of it, let alone know how to play it. So by exposing you to this, hopefully maybe it'll get you interested, and hopefully you can try this out with your local playgroup as well. So what are the requirements for Snake Draft? Now, you can theoretically run it with any number of players, but from what we found, 8 players is the optimal ideal amount, because given the current card pool, you will be drafting from the entire Netrunner card pool, so you want to have 8 players. That evens things out, allows everyone to get just the right amount of cards. Now, one of the big upsides of Snake Draft compared to regular cube draft is that you do not need to dedicate someone's collection to the cube. What happens is, after the drafting process, everyone builds their own drafted deck list using their own collection, and then shows up to play it. And speaking of which, that's the other good thing. The drafting process does not need to be done in person. In most regular drafts that you might think of, you will have to arrange a time to get together, sit around the table, and pass cards amongst each other and draft. This drafting and then playing process could take hours on end. Some playgroups might not have the extended amount of time they need to organize a draft. The upside of Snake Draft is that you can do the drafting online. And you don't even need everyone to be present, because it is a turn-based draft. Not everyone needs to be present at the same time. You can, take your turn and then pass the turn on to the next person and wait for the other person to come online to do their draft. Of course, this has the implication that it could easily extend the draft to a very long duration, so you should be prepared for that. We expect the current snake draft that we are doing to take from anywhere from several days to weeks. So the time span is sort of a consideration. But if everyone who is drafting is prepared to be involved in this for a few weeks, it doesn't need to be a lot of involvement, mind you. It's just picking a bunch of cards when it's your turn. And all you have to do is to be online fairly frequently, so that the other players won't have to wait too long for the pick to come around back to them. So those are the basic requirements. So now, let's talk about Snake Draft and what it really is. This is a public draft. As opposed to Cube Draft, I'll be making lots of comparisons to Cube Draft, assuming you all know what it is. But in Cube Draft, what happens is the cards that you draft are secret, they're private. No one knows what cards you drafted. If you have a whole bunch of Scorched Earths in your deck, no one would know. Whereas in Snake Draft, because every single card you draft is public information, everyone will know what's in your deck. In Snake Draft, the drafting process is what's important. It is the highlight of everything. So expect this to be more drafting process oriented, and not so much focused on the end result, which is your deck list or the playing of games. If you are interested in just playing lots of games of Netrunner, this might not be for you. But if you are interested in tactical selection of cards, Snake Draft is one of the best formats you can get. Also, a fair amount of politicking is involved. Back to the point about this being a public draft, because you can see what others pick, and because there is the potential for hate drafting in this format, there will be politics. People will try to collude, try to, make it such that they can divide the card pool evenly, or try to suffocate someone from the card pool. This adds to the fun of it. although it might not sound like it. But this brings up a very important point. More so than most other draft formats, the group dynamics of the players involved in the draft actually contributes quite significantly to the enjoyment of the draft. I mean, this is kind of an obvious point. It kind of is the same for most casual board games as well. Picking a good group of people who are all interested and who can contribute to great banter and lots of interaction is very important. So group dynamics is actually quite more important, I should say, than most other things when it comes to deciding whether you want to hold a snake draft. So now let's get into the rules of the snake draft proper. What happens during the snake draft? First, we go through the drafting phase, the picking phase. This is the meat of the snake draft, and here's how it works. All the players get a single column on the table. We have a drafting table as such. Now this is a greatly scaled down version. In an actual snake draft, you would have 8 players, as I mentioned earlier, so you would have 8 columns, and the number of rows, instead of there being 6 here, there will be 20 rows. So it would be quite a big table, but rest assured, it's not going to be complicated once you understand it. Each cell represents a pick, so the total number of cells in this table would be 160 if you multiply the columns by the rows, and that's the total number of picks that will happen through the picking phase. During the picking phase, each player takes turns to draft a single runner and court card in the entire Netrunner card pool at the same time. Players may not overlap their picks. We will start from the top left and go towards the right. So Alice will pick, Brian will then pick, Chaos Theory will pick, and finally David picks. Once David is done picking, we'll loop back, reversing the order, starting with David and going back to Alice. Hence the name Snake Draft, because it snakes through the table in a convoluted S shape. This continues for each of the 20 rows, and once we're done with the 20 rows, the drafting phase is complete. Everyone has a set of cards they can play with. Now, you notice that you are not allowed to overlap cards. All cards picked must be unique, so if Alice picks a Temujin, no one else can pick Temujin. And in fact, this extends to the deck building phase as well. So let's talk a bit about deck building. We'll focus on Alice here, and we'll look at some of the cards here. Alice, in her final deck, can play Temujin Contract and Data Sucker. Why? Because both of these cards were drafted by her. She has Temujin, she has Sucker. She can play both of these cards in her deck. She can put any number, any quantity, 0, 1, 2, 3, any amount that is legal. But Alice cannot play Account Siphon because Account Siphon has already been drafted by Brian. If some other drafter, all the cards that the other drafters have drafted cannot be put in your deck at all. So by drafting cards in the drafting phase, not only are you securing access to them yourself, you are denying access of these cards to the rest. Brian, Chaos Theory, and David cannot play Temujin Contract or Data Sucker in their deck. And similarly, Alice cannot play Account Siphon or Same Old Thing or Aaron Moron, because they all have been drafted by the other players. What about Special Order? Assuming Alice did not draft Special Order, if neither of the other 3 players drafted Special Order, then Special Order is a free-for-all card. Alice can play it, Brian can play it, everyone can play it. You can choose to play it or not. So basically, any cards left undrafted after the entire drafting phase are up for grabs. So that's the basics of Snake Draft. It differs from regular Cube Draft because instead of drafting individual copies of cards, you're drafting an entire playset at once. If you pick Spy Camera, for example, you get up to all 6 copies of it if you want. And similarly, drafting Astroscript is a bit risky because it only gives you 1 single card because Astroscript is limited one-off. Which brings us to the next slide, which talks about some balance considerations we made. One of the things that we decided is that card errata will apply as per the latest FAQ, but no most wanted lists. So things like Wireless Net Pavilion and Museum of History are unique, and Astroscript is 1 per deck. Most wanted list doesn't apply, so you can splash Eli's for 1 influence, that's fine. Another big difference, if you are coming from the Cube Draft mindset, is that a legal deck must be built for your ID. Unlike Cube Draft, where you can mix and match between factions and potentially have combos such as say, genetic resequencing and AstroScript pilot program in the same deck, right? Cross-faction agendas. You cannot do this in Snake Draft. In Snake Draft, you must build a legal deck based on your identity. So if you pick a criminal ID, for example, you only have 15 influence to spend on your not our faction cards, assuming that you picked something like Andromeda or Gabriel Santiago. And speaking of identities, you have to draft identities during the draft as well. If you draft Andromeda, for example, no one else can take Andromeda. So the same thing applies as to do regular cards. On roughly the same point, all tournament legal cards are eligible for drafting, implying that non-legal cards cannot be drafted. So we are talking about draft cards such as the Mask and the Shadow, the draft IDs. You don't even try to draft them. Nice try. That's not going to happen. And I suppose the Terminal Directive cards that are Terminal Directive exclusive should not be eligible for drafting as well. And further in the future, once rotation occurs, it's optional as a tournament organizer whether you want to allow rotated cards to be in the card pool as well. So these are just some of the considerations you should think of if you are going to organize a Snake Draft tournament. One final rule is that everyone has 3 copies of Hedge Fund, Gamble, and Jackson available to them. This, no one likes having auto-includes in the decks, but these 3 cards are ubiquitous for a reason. They smooth out gameplay a lot, and gameplay is a lot less sluggish without them. It also helps the corp balance a lot, especially with Jackson Howard, which is more of a rules fix than a buff for the corp. So this is why these 3 cards are available for everyone, and no one can hate draft them. So yeah, these are some of the rules that pertain to balance considerations. Let's move on to another set of considerations, logistics. If you plan to host a Snake Draft tournament of your own because you find it interesting, and you should, because yes, it's a very interesting tournament and you'll get people interested in a variant of Netrunner. What do you have to consider? If you're going to do online drafting like we do, you want to set up a chat group. This is quite important because you want to be able to notify people when it's their turn to draft. And the best way to do this is through a function like Slack, where you are able to notify fellow players when it's their turn to draft. Otherwise, they might just be hanging around not knowing that it's their turn to draft. Keep in mind that everyone is going on with their real life chores and businesses throughout the day. So, yep, being able to keep track of where the draft is at is actually quite important. Also, as you saw the table in the the drafting table that I showed earlier, you want to be able to set that up as well in a place where everyone can view and edit it. And I guess one of the better ways to do it is via Google Sheets. But yeah, those are the 2 things you need to set up if you are going to host a Snake Draft tournament. So finally, after you're done drafting your decks and deck building, you want to duke it out with your decks, and that's perfectly possible. You can set up some form of tournament, be it round robin matches or a standard Swiss tournament. That's perfectly fine. But I think because this draft is so unique in the sense that the drafting process is so intellectually challenging and very core to the reason why you do this Snake Draft in the first place, I think one interesting thing you can do is to grade each other's drafts. Post it online somewhere on a forum or Reddit or something like that, and let other people have a look and discuss it. It's actually quite cool. Here's a sample of a draft grade from the draft that the big boy did about 6 months ago. One of the sample write-ups on StimHack forums. It's really interesting, and yeah, you can go into quite deep analysis if you read this passage about how players choose to draft their cards and the decisions they make. There's a lot of thought that goes in the decision process, so much so that I can't cover it in this video. I might do follow-up videos pertaining to our current Snake Draft and my thoughts and my decision processes. Let me know if you're interested in them. We'll see if I will do them sometime in the future. But for now, I'll be just continuing along with my Snake Draft. If you want to follow along live as we do the Snake Draft, go search Team UK Does Snake Draft on StimHack forums. There's a topic that I created there, and you can check out the link to see where our Snake Draft is at. Currently, we are only midway into the second round, so there's still a lot of game to be played. It's a very interesting development so far, Yeah, you can comment in the comment section if you want to give any comments on the draft so far. Otherwise, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I do highly encourage you to organize such events, variants of Netrunner, in your local community play group if interest seems to be dying down, because I think such events are very good for keeping Netrunner in your local community alive, as well as to attract new people who might be interested in some other form of Netrunner. Now, Snake Draft is something I didn't mention earlier. It is a bit more tailored towards experienced players because you would need to have a full grasp of the entire Netrunner card pool to be able to draft effectively. A new player who doesn't know that many cards in the card pool, or who is still trying to buy new data packs and still doesn't know most of the cards, will be very disadvantaged in such a draft. So that's something to keep in mind. This is best done with a group of experienced players who hopefully have hopefully have a good social dynamic. So that's all for this Snake Draft rules introduction. Hopefully you found it useful, and thanks for watching Happy Net Running. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.